Good evening, I'm Jason Vio. Here's what's making news right now.
Students are taking a stance, socially, because they don't like, what was done to Indigenous people.
It's nice to feel a part of the rest of the city because, the bridge does act as that barrier.
I think that the biggest thing that our community needs is to know that, for one, things are being done and they're here and they aren't going to stop until we know the exact source and how to fix it.
Thanks for joining us. Some high school students in Windsor are taking a stand on Indigenous issues by staying in their seats during O Canada. Since the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation at the end of September, the Public School Board says more students are choosing to make that statement. CBC Windsor's Jacob Barker has this exclusive story.
It's a topic of conversation that's on everyone's mind at Walkerville Collegiate. When O Canada starts, students stay seated.
The English curriculum has changed to learning about Indigenous voices and lives and their history. So after learning about that every single day, you feel really guilty for standing for O Canada, and you feel like, I don't think this is the right decision.
Some take a knee.
I feel like we shouldn't stand for a song that's praising our country for doing awful things, or something that says our land when it's not our land, it's stolen land.
And others, especially with Remembrance Day around the corner, have decided to stand up and sing.
I'm going to stand. I don't find anything, personally I'm Indigenous myself, but I don't find anything wrong with it. But I do respect the people who do what they choose. But me, I'm not going to sit. It's disrespectful to our veterans.
And some sometimes sit and sometimes stand.
Even though I don't like war, I don't support war, I can support the people who put their lives on the line. But I sit a lot of times because there is a lot of injustice in Canada.
The Greater Essex County District School Board says that more students have been opting to stay in their seats since the first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation happened in September. It also says that it supports those students' actions.
We really do appreciate their efforts and their passion to be allies, and we want to encourage them to do so, but really from an informed position.
Adrian Klein, a First Nation, Métis and Inuit social worker for the school board, spent some time speaking with students at Walkerville about the subject. He says sometimes he sits and sometimes he stands for the anthem.
Just sitting is a performative way of supporting, right? We want students to support in an engaging way.
But whether students want to sit or stand, Klein says those who are making the decision to stay in their seats should do so with the intention of doing meaningful actions outside the classrooms as well.
It's through community, it's through connecting with Indigenous voices and listening, right? And continuing not learning. So yeah, it's definitely, there's more work than just sitting if you wanted to, be a true ally.
Jacob Barker, CBC News, Windsor.
A pilot project in Windsor has helped local business take off, uniting neighborhoods within our city. CBC's Jennifer LaGrassa hits the streets to find out more.
This is changing the way Windsor operates. 6 months into a year-long pilot project, businesses here are saying that this is helping them feel connected to the city and helping their bottom line.
What would normally be an hour walk from the downtown was only about 15 minutes, saving riders on money and time and opening up food, drink, and shop options.
Ford City is in a really unique location. When we look at it on the map, we're actually at sort of like the far edge of Windsor before you sort of run into the Ford factory that's there. And so we really rely on ways to draw people from Walkerville and from downtown over to this area. And I think the scooter is that bridge. I think this is part of a larger conversation of how we reimagine urban transportation to support businesses and older commercial sectors of the city. Definitely a car-centric city, but it may be a car-centric city because the city was designed in that way. But I think when you give people the option of, again, reimagining how they use their urban spaces, you'll see a lot of people wanting to get on bikes or scooters or skateboards.
And the metrics show exactly that. Windsor users have the longest average ride time in Canada, spending more than 25 minutes scooting around. More than 135,000 rides have been completed, many from repeat users. Some would take the scooter from the downtown to places like Ford City, Walkerville, And
here in Little Italy, one business owner I spoke with said that when they closed the street for pedestrians, there were quite a few scooters here on Erie Street. And it was a similar story over in the West End.
one business owner told me it's easy for Sandwich Town to feel separated from the downtown. The Ambassador Bridge creates a physical barrier. With many students gone this past summer because of COVID, the area needed people to take on the distance.
It was pretty quiet with COVID until people started getting out on their bicycles. And then with the e-scooters, it just brought another dimension. And the people that were on the scooters were having a really good time. And I just think because of where we're located, the e-scooters can bring the people further from the other side of the city.
Business owners say they want to see the city continue the pilot after 1 year and hope this sparks conversations about more accessible transportation.
The city is expecting a progress report early next year. Jennifer LaGrassa, CBC News, Windsor.
Wheatley residents will have a chance to ask Chatham-Kent officials questions surrounding the investigation into the town's explosion. A citizens committee requested the in-person meeting that starts in less than 30 minutes.
I think that the biggest thing that our community needs is to know that, for one, things are being done and they're here and they aren't going to stop until we know the exact source and how to fix it. The second thing that I think our community needs to know is that a lot of times when we get these updates through like a 311 application, we get email updates. A lot of them say there's no new updates. So when that happens, it's a bit discouraging for our community because we think, well, if there's no update, then what is being done? What are you actually doing?
Several residents have been displaced by the explosion back in August. It's believed to be linked to gas leaks that have been detected, but that's not been confirmed. The CAO for the municipality says an investigation is centering around 2 abandoned oil wells that have been identified in the area. The residents who have been displaced worry about their homes being burglarized. The meeting is open to the first 150 people who show up and will also be live streamed on social media. Nearly 3 million people can book an appointment for a third dose against COVID-19. The Ontario government says seniors 70 and up and a number of other groups need extra protection from infection. Lorenda Redekop has more.
Lisa Christensen will soon be eligible for a booster shot.
This is a little bit of good news right now. I need some good medical news for people in my family.
She has 2 doses of AstraZeneca. We were there back in May when she got her second dose. Earlier this week, she says her regular cancer follow-up came back irregular.
So they've found something else. So I'm kind of coping with that at the same time that I'm coping with an increase in my mother's dementia level.
Her mother, who lives with her, is 100 years old. She'll also be eligible for her booster. Along with people 70 plus and AstraZeneca recipients, frontline healthcare workers and Indigenous people can also receive a third dose booster shot.
These additional groups will benefit from a booster dose as they are at increased risk of waning immunity and greater risk of exposure, serious illness, and outcomes.
People have to wait at least 6 months after their second dose for a booster. The chief medical officer says people with 2 doses of AstraZeneca are still protected, but at a 10 to 15% lower level than those with mRNA vaccines. The province is planning for others to get a third dose. That would likely happen sometime in 2022, all dependent on advice from the Federal Advisory Committee on Immunizations.
So we have seen slow and gradual fading immunity in some populations. In the general population, we're not seeing that at present, and hence I think we have time to reflect on the best science and the best timelines.
One infectious diseases expert isn't convinced healthcare workers need boosters, given that it appears immunity is still high.
We have to remember this is a medical intervention. There can be inflammatory complications, and we may need boosters down the road for different variants. So we might not want to be giving this vaccine too many extra times.
He thinks the doses are needed more elsewhere.
I think that if you take away from the highest risk groups, these vaccines should be going to other places so they can get their first doses in places like Africa, South America, and in Asia.
Lisa Christensen was planning to visit a restaurant indoors with her mom later this month, their first time during the pandemic, to celebrate her mom's 101st birthday. But with waning immunity, she's now reconsidering that. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
And here in Windsor, Essex, we're ahead of the province. Many can start booking their third shot now. That's for people 70 and over, healthcare workers, Indigenous populations, or those who live with an individual that identifies as Indigenous, and for those who got 2 doses of AstraZeneca. There are multiple locations where people can get their third dose. You can find more information on the wevax.ca website. The Ontario government will not make COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory for hospital workers. Doug Ford says he asked for input from hospitals and other organizations last month, and after assessing those responses along with, quote, real-world evidence, the Ford government says it will stay with its current approach, allowing unvaccinated workers to be tested regularly. However, local hospitals have already implemented mandatory vaccination policies for all staff. Some employees at Windsor Regional Hospital, Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare, and Erie Shores Healthcare face termination for not complying, and some have already been fired. A sculpture project that began in 2012 has finally been complete.
I'm really excited by the project. I think it's a great addition to our public art inventory for the City of Windsor. It really gives people an opportunity to literally sit down in public art and enjoy it.
The You and Me sculpture was originally commissioned by the city's International Relations Committee as a legacy project for the Children's Games. The original artist, Lori Shintani, had to walk away from the project. Artists Mark and Laura Williams finished the sculpture by casting it in bronze. Shintani told CBC News last year she still wanted credit for the piece and was still interested in working on it. The city came to an agreement with Shintani to allow the sculpture project to move forward. She is given credit for conceptualizing the sculpture on a plaque that sits with the chairs in Jackson Park. The sculpture cost $120,000. The annual migration of birds between their summer and winter homes reveals a lot to researchers. And birds are sensitive to the environment, so it's no surprise climate change is already affecting their numbers and their flight paths. Fiona Odlum has more on that story.
At this bird sanctuary north of Regina, Jordan Rustad spends her days catching all kinds of birds.
We have a little chipping sparrow here.
She gently extracts them from a net so the research can begin.
So the first thing I do is I weigh the bird.
Rustad measures their wings and checks their fat levels. Then she bands them with a tracking number so their migration can be documented on a global reporting map.
These little guys weigh less than a loonie and they fly thousands of miles every year, and it's amazing that they make it at all.
And too many don't survive. Their epic journeys to find food and breed are being altered by climate change and other factors. Rustad says over 2 decades, yellow warblers shifted their average migration by 15 days.
Earlier in the spring, because bugs are emerging a little bit earlier, so the birds need to be there so they can take advantage of that food source. And in the fall, they've kind of extended their window. They don't have to rush through as much because they're not really being chased out by all this cold weather.
Even more so this year because of this summer's heat dome in Western Canada. The excessive heat combined with the lack of rain in June and July forced birds to stick around even longer, stalling their migration.
That can push some species over the brink. So I think there's a very, very deep concern about climate change for that reason.
Shorebirds are among the most rapidly declining species in Canada. And while they normally travel thousands of kilometers to and from the far north, a growing body of evidence suggests that due to climate change, the Arctic is no longer a safe harbor for breeding and nesting.
These benefits are disappearing. We postulate that animal migrations will be a lot less extensive.
Rustad is already seeing changes in the numbers of birds and the path they take.
And so if you're seeing large changes in bird populations, you're seeing differences in their timing, you know something's going on underneath them, and that's basically going to be bugs and plants and like other climate-related issues.
For her, the impact of climate change on bird migration is something she sees on the ground and at her fingertips. Fiona Odlum, CBC News, near Regina.
Still to come here on CBC Windsor News at 6. Temperatures warming up slightly over the next few days. We'll have your full weather forecast coming up right after the break. A remarkable archaeological find has been retrieved from the bottom of a lake near Madison, Wisconsin.
We have no canoes of this age that are this intact, and this is the first one that's been found with artifacts still inside. So it's absolutely unprecedented for us.
This 1,200-year-old canoe, still in one piece, was painstakingly brought to the surface yesterday over a period of 5 hours, and 6 months after it was first discovered by scuba divers who were testing equipment. Historians believe it was used for fishing and belonged to the ancestors of the Indigenous Ho-Chunk Nation in the area. It's being moved to a conservation facility to save it from degrading in hopes of displaying it in a new museum in the future. CBC's Colette Kennedy joins us live now for a look at weather. Colette, I noticed a bit of a warming trend coming up, and personally, I have a little bit of yard work left to do, some things to clean up outside before the snow eventually comes.
It's funny you mention that, Jason, because I mean, they should have been brought in by now, but I do have a few plants.
I'm the same way.
They went to the garage for a few days, and then I see if I can get to them, and get those guys sorted out. They still need a little bit of work before bringing them into the house. I want to show you some of the chills from this morning. Let me go to this side. How about -1? Now I'm rounding these to whole numbers, but still -1 this morning in the Hamilton area and up into Muskoka, -3. London, freezing. We had a cool start, and you know what? Tonight the readings are going to be even a little bit cooler. Not much, but just a little bit cooler. But Jason mentioned the warm-up that's coming, so that's the flip side that's coming to us soon. 5 degrees are the current temperatures, but we've still got a ways to go to slip through the overnight hours. Even though the winds have backed off and you can see they're kind of various directions, still getting some lake effect. Just the temperatures of the lakes are closer to around 13 degrees, and then at night, especially when we see that temperature getting to freezing or just below, it's enough of a differential there. You need at least a 13-degree difference to get into some lake effects. So you can see the areas where there's some mixed precipitation. It's rain where it's warmer there out over the lake. And a few of those isolated, like very wet flurries or kind of little mixed showers certainly are possible, but especially as we go into tomorrow in the afternoon from Sarnia through that corridor over towards London, we do have the chance here towards Windsor, a slighter chance. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's a lower chance. Let's put it like that. We do get into some sunshine, however, in there as well. And you kind of know the drill, right? When you do even see lake effect stuff, you can have sunny skies. The next thing you know, there's some wet flurries and then they're gone again. You drive right out of it. So we do get into high pressure though. And as the winds back off, it does really mean some improving conditions for us. So we'll be getting more sun kind of mixing in there into the afternoon. It becomes a little more variable. So overnight tonight, I did say just a little bit cooler. So -2 Windsor and Leamington, Chatham, Kent, and there's some of that chillier air. It gets a little scarier there as you see numbers like that. Tomorrow we're going to bounce back the rebound to 9 degrees through Harrow and into Windsor and into Leamington. That's what we'll be seeing. And then Friday, you know, you have to be patient, and it is very gradual. So you have to appreciate the little jump in temp we get with about a degree a day. So Friday 10, Saturday 11, and then it's more significant as we go towards Sunday, Monday. But really important too, Jason, are those overnight lows coming up after tonight and tomorrow night.
That's great. Maybe we can crack the windows open without needing 4 blankets on top of us.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but maybe.
All right, thanks so much, Colette.
You're welcome.
Still to come here on CBC Windsor News at 6, big banks are making big promises when it comes to a greener future. That story is coming up next. Most of the world leaders, including Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, have left the COP26 Environmental Summit in Glasgow. Now, the work is underway to turn their commitments and pledges into workable policy. One of the key people taking on that job is former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney. He is the UN's Special Envoy on Climate Action and Finance. His job is to find the money to help drive the global economy away from fossil fuels and toward clean, sustainable energy.
All members have followed rigorous internal governance processes to make their commitments that will reshape their business models to fund the sustainable transformations of our economies.
Carney says the world's biggest financial institutions, including Canada's major banks, have thrown their support behind the effort to convert the global economy. The target was to secure $100 trillion in capital for the project. Carney says $130 trillion has already been committed. 450 firms have signed on to the program, and they are promising to follow several financial initiatives that signal they are making green investments a priority. Emissions from cars and trucks have long been a major concern in the effort to reduce greenhouse gases. Now, a biotech firm based in Scotland is offering a solution that could see our gas guzzlers sipping something more refined.
So we at Celtic Renewables are pioneering a process whereby we can take residues from industries such as the whisky industry and convert them into high-value products, namely butanol, which is actually being used to power this car right now. So the benefit of this particular fuel is that we're not producing it from petrochemicals. This is made from living carbon, essentially. It's from a residues of an industry that's one of the most important industries in the Scottish economy, and we can take their residues and turn them into something that we need right now, made from sustainable resources. We use these chemicals every day of our lives in a multitude of different ways. Our view is we can continue to use these chemicals in everything from healthcare to hygiene, but we can make them from more sustainable resources in a circular economy. Wow. I hope that it does help us to get to net zero. I hope we hit all the targets that everybody's putting in place. But if it's just about targets, if it's setting one more target and putting the whole solution down the road, then that's just not acceptable. This has to be the COP, where we stop talking about why we need to tackle climate change and tell everybody how we do it, how we pay for it, how is it going to happen.
The Newfoundland and Labrador government says a cyber attack is behind the crippling outage of the province's healthcare network. And the IT failure, now in its 5th day, has affected all 4 of the province's health authorities.
Those involved in the attack may actually be monitoring what we are saying in media and on the floor of the House. It's very important, therefore, we don't do or say anything that compromises the efforts underway to investigate and resolve this matter.
The attack has caused the cancellation of thousands of non-emergency medical procedures, tests, and appointments. Authorities say they're trying to restore service, though the full extent of the damage is still unknown. It's not clear when things will return to normal. The RCMP have launched a criminal investigation. An Ontario grandmother has become the oldest person to graduate from York University with a master's degree. The 87-year-old just earned her 2nd master's, this one in political science. She defended her thesis over Zoom on post-Civil War Sri Lanka and the prospects for peace. And she has a message for anyone else thinking of pursuing their passions later in life.
I thought I could tell the world that peace, justice, and nonviolence should prevail. Learning and search for knowledge can never stop. We learn that much, and there is a lot in front of us, like an ocean, knowledge. So you can go on and on and on.
She says the secret to her success is ambition and self-confidence. Well, that's it for CBC Windsor News at 6. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget, for news anytime, head to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. Don't forget, we're on social media as well. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The Rick Mercer Report is up next. Have a great night.